Howdy Booktube, and welcome to today's video, which is going to be a TBR book pile. I'm wearing my jellyfish t-shirt, which seemed much better in the catalogue than this. Just looks like a sort of tie-dyed t-shirt really, so it's a bit disappointing. I like jellyfish, or I like them conceptually. I want to hug one for obvious reasons. That's why I wanted the t-shirt, but a bit disappointing. Okay, so I've been through the drawer in my bedroom. Those of you who took the virtual tour around my diffuse library, i.e. the shed, but the only part of that video was the sort of the immediate prospect of reading books I have in my bedroom in a drawer in my bedside table, and these are all the books in it. I'm currently reading Mosaic Man by Ronald Suchanek, which I'm really enjoying, but I'll finish that this weekend. And then I'm not sure what to read, so I thought I'd go through and share these books and invite any opinions as to which ones to go for next. Okay, so the first one is Thomas Pynchon, Inherent Vice, which you might have seen briefly in my unboxing video, which I think was from February. The reason I'm not particularly smitten by Pynchon's work, I've read a couple of his books, but the reason I went for this one is because it's sort of it's a noir sort of detective thriller with a sort of religious theme, which sort of chimes with something that I've been musing on in my own writing work. So there's that. Blake Butler, Skysaw, again from the February unboxing video. Now Blake Butler I'm a big fan of. And I had thought that I'd actually get to this sort of quite quickly, and I think there are about 16 books in that unboxing video, and I thought that I would get to this as one of the first, but it just keeps slipping to the bottom. You kind of have to be in the mood for Blake Butler, because he is a bit raw, not in his style, but in his subject matter. Very much about the human body and assaults on it. The next one is Jenny Offill, The Department of Speuclation, which also came in that unboxing video. Now this appealed because when Eric Carl Anderson of Lonesome Reader was predicting what would make the long list of the women's price of fiction, three of the books that he and Anna James talked about, they compared to this book. So I thought, oh blimey, this book must have something for it if it's so influential. So I was curious, not really knowing anything about it, and I've been not put off, but it hasn't sort of risen to the top of my to be read pile, because this is what it says on the back. Adored by readers and critics alike, Department of Speuclation navigates the jagged edges of a modern marriage to tell a story that is funny, surprising and wise. That in itself doesn't really sort of grab me, but I will get to it because, you know, as I say, it's got other authors being compared to this as some sort of Bible. Okay, Mark Thomas, Extreme Rambling, Walking Israel's Barrier for Fun. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, who would like to be anyone outside of Britain, Mark Thomas is a stand-up comedian who has got increasingly sort of political in his act, to the point where he's not really telling jokes anymore. He's staging political pranks and stunts, very, very entertaining. So, and then he tends to write books around them. So he did one about a year of tiny protests, where I think every week or every day they would sort of, you know, point up the ridiculousness of some of the legislation that's still on the statute books, and stage a protest, and, you know, try and get the law changed. And just there was one that was a particular genius, whereby every public demonstration in London has to be signed off by a particular officer in the Metropolitan Police. So Mark Thomas put it in writing that he wanted to stage a demonstration, that the Metropolitan Policeman who considers demonstrations ought to be sacked. So the guy would have to read this request for a demonstration calling for his job. And you know, he's got talking to Mark Thomas, and he thought, well, you know, this is brilliant. How can I refuse this? And I actually met that policeman through my work, and you know, he was quite a good egg. I don't think he's still in that position, but anyway, this is, I guess, what it says, where the apartheid wall that Israel built, separating it from the sort of Palestinian territories, Mark Thomas just goes walking along its length, always within touching distance of it, and has all sorts of random encounters with Israelis and Palestinians alike. So I'm looking forward to this because I think it will be great and very entertaining. But the problem is, I don't read a lot of non-fiction, and I've actually got a couple of non-fiction on the go at the moment, which I'll come to. So that pushes this one down in the priority list for me, even though I think it'll be a great read. Ian McEwan, Nutshell, is the next one. This is right through the post today, actually, second hand. I'd sort of given up on Ian McEwan. I mean, I do like some of his work, and some of his other books drive me to distraction. So Solar was the book that just broke the camel's back for me. I just thought it was dreck. But Beth Chat's Books talked about this in one of her recent videos. And A, I trust her judgment implicitly, and B, something about it and the way she described it, I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a go. But again, my love-hate relationship with McEwan is such that it wouldn't be my next read. Now, my documents, Alejandro Zambra on my favourite label, Fitzcarraldo editions. Alejandro Zambra is Chilean and wrote that book called, what was it called? Multiple Choice, where he uses the brilliant device of compiling these sort of multiple choice questions to take you through recent Chilean history of the dictatorship under Pinochet and the fallout out of that. And it's a brilliant piece of work. So ordinarily I would rush to read these, but it's short stories, which I hadn't realised when I bought it. And I'm slightly down on short stories. I read Carmen Maria Machado's Her Body and Other Parties earlier this year, and which started off brilliantly and then went downhill very rapidly. And I did a whole video on what makes a good short story collection. How do you put together, how do you decide the running order of the stories, and why do so many short story authors put their best story first? And it can only be downhill from there. So the first reason that I haven't got round to this is because it's short stories, and the second is Fitzcarraldo. As I say, one of my favourite imprints. But the book of theirs that got nominated on the Man Booker International Prize long list, which is called Flights, which I think has made it onto the shortlist, by a Polish author whose name I'm not even going to dare to pronounce. It so didn't appeal to me, even though I was sort of quite determined to read as many of the Booker International titles that sounded interesting. But that one didn't. It was sort of travel fiction with a sort of bits of historical. It's not actually about these specific items, but I've read these before. Napoleon's penis has gone missing. Einstein's brain was removed when he died for an autopsy because he was a genius, and then the strange story of what happened to his brain. Jeremy Bentham is also his skeleton to be preserved in a sort of automata form in, I think, is it University College, London. So I've read a lot of this stuff, and it's quite a dull trope, and Flight seemed to be doing versions of that. So I'm having sort of religiously read everything produced by Fitzcarraldo in the last sort of 3 or 4, they've not appealed to me, so I'm slightly perturbed at that that development. Hopefully that will change. Okay, this is called Politics of the Asylum by Adam Steiner. Adam Steiner messaged me on Twitter. I must have been following him, because otherwise you don't get direct messages, and I couldn't for the life of me recall who he was or anything. But he said, look, hey, I've got a new book out. Would you be prepared to read it? And so, based on the author's experience working in the NHS, which is the National Health Service in Britain, Politics of the Asylum is a nightmare vision of the modern healthcare system. Steiner's challenging debut is a novel for our times, and an emotive and a highly original story of people trying to do more than simply exist. So I said, yeah, I'll read this and I'll review it for you. But I did tell him I don't know when I'll get to it. That's all I can tell you, really. It's on Urbane Publications, who are very good independent publishers who sort of really support new writing and help people get started. So I feel that this ought to go to near to the top, because it is about time that I read it and turned in the review, as I promised him. It's been about a month since I've had it. Samuel Beckett. So last week I watched 2 different hour-plus long documentaries about the life and writing of Samuel Beckett, who's an author I know all his stage work and love it. He's my favourite playwright. Less familiar with his prose. Last year I started the trilogy and I read Malloy. This year I'm going to read Malone Dies, and possibly this year I'll finish it with The Unspeakable, or is it The Unnamed? No, The Unnameable, or whichever one it's called. But in the interim, this preceded that trilogy, and sounded very interesting. So again, I feel obliged. I'd have to read Malone Dies before I read What, but I wanted to have What sort of there in my TBR pile whenever I get to it. This is John Hawkes, The Blood Oranges. There's no point showing it to you. It's a very battered second-hand hardback copy without its dust jacket. So this is a hangover from my when I was doing my postmodern sort of binge at the start of the year. I'd read a John Hawkes book last year, and then I read one specifically for my postmodern wrap-up, and this was to be the third. But I was pretty disillusioned with the whole postmodern thing that I undertook, and I'll post the link to that video. And Hawkes, particularly the 2 books of his I read, I couldn't see them being postmodern, and I thought they were okay. I think this might have a bit more to it. I think this is a really nasty book, sort of sexually persecutory of people sort of talking around a table, but also sort of preying on each other in a really sort of nasty sexual way. So if I could sort of have enough space in my head to sort of remove the association with the 2 previous Hawkes books I read, which really didn't do it for me, then I'll get back the enthusiasm I got for this when I got it in the first place. W.G. Sebald, The Immigrants. Right, so I read a non-fiction work of Sebald last year called, I can't remember what it was called, but it was about sort of the bombing of Germany. So everyone knows about the Blitz, when the German Luftwaffe tried to bomb Britain into sort of defeat. And this is when the tide of the war had changed and Germany had lost control of the skies, and the British and American air forces were bombing Germany to smithereens. And Sebald's point was how in Germany no historians really write about that. And it was a brilliant book. So I thought, I'd heard Sebald mentioned, very positively by people like Will Self, but I'd never read any of his fiction. And I went onto Amazon trying to decide which one to get. He'd set one in Theresienstadt, the sort of model concentration camp the Nazis had in Czechoslovakia, which is the one they were prepared to show to the Red Cross, which is a complete sort of lie as to how inmates there lived. And because I'd written a short story based on an updating of Theresienstadt, I thought I'd get that one. But I've gone for this one. It was really hard deciding which one, just on the basis of their blurs, because I think it's really hard to sum up Sebald. Because although these are fiction, I think there's a lot of blurring of the borders of fiction and non-fiction. So one of the most innovative writers of the late 20th century, it is as if the spirit of ruined Europe was speaking through him, said Jeff Dyer in the Guardian. And the book itself, at first, The Immigrants appears simply to document the lives of 4 Jewish émigrés in the 20th century. But gradually, as Sebald's precise, almost dreamlike prose begins to draw their stories, the 4 narrations merge into one overwhelming evocation of exile and loss. So I think you have to be in the mood for this. I think it is going to be sort of dreamlike and it's not going to sort of pulse along. So I do definitely want to read Sebald. Okay, Peter Handke, The Jukebox, Other Essays and on Storytelling. So I'd read quite a lot of Peter Handke prose in my late teens, early 20s, and he was quite a significant writer for me as a postmodernist. And then he's rather fallen out of favour because of his political views. So basically, he's an apologist for Slobodan Milosevic, who was the Serbian leader who basically initiated the wars that destroyed Yugoslavia. I mean, Yugoslavia was breaking up, and it's because he, as the Serbian president, wasn't prepared to let the other states go independent, and sort of basically Serbian greater nationalism was laid behind it. And Handke was his apologist and spokesperson. Handke is Austrian. But he was an important writer, sort of, you know, stylistically and sort of sort of narrative experimentation for me. So when I saw that this was essays on storytelling, I thought, great, you know, be interested, you know, because a lot of postmodernist writing, fiction writing, eschews story or deconstructs story, or sees story as unnecessary to the, you know, to the modern novel. So I thought, well, you know, it'd be interesting to get Peter Handke's insights on that. But there's 3 essays. There's an essay on tiredness, essay on the jukebox, an essay on the successful day. So they're not. It's not him writing specifically on the craft of story and novel writing. So I was a bit sort of disappointed with that once I took receipt of this. Handke is unmistakably one of the best writers we have, and that self-discovering tendency in contemporary writing we have chosen to call postmodernism. His plays and novels have steadily and splendidly put to the test many of our essential presumptions about the nature of reality and art, said Malcolm Bradbury. It's not often you come across writing that resounds with the undeniable sense that a writer's life hangs in the balance, says Sam Shepard, who's, you know, one of my favourite playwrights. And I got the sense that this is about more Handke's playwriting, which I'm less familiar with and less interested in, to be honest. So I'm not sure this is going to deliver what I thought it was going to deliver, which is sort of an inquiry into the nature of story and fiction. Geoffrey Eugenides, Fresh Complaint, which is his first collection of short stories. Again, it's sort of suffering from my sort of slight disillusion with short stories at the moment. So it's slipped down and down and down. I do love Eugenides. And then one of the 2 non-fiction books, which, you know, is an ongoing read. This isn't a priority. This is my next read. This is ongoing when I'm, you know, come back home from work, prepare to read for half an hour, read a chapter of this. This is Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief by Jordan B. Peterson. Yes, that Jordan B. Peterson, who's doing a lot of trolling and being trolled online for his views on, you know, snowflake mentality and, you know, the sort of support culture, and you know, he's totally against that. He's basically loved by the right wing. But before all of that, before anyone had heard of him, he wrote this book, which sort of gets to the, you know, it's a very good treatment of the origins of why we have story, why we need story, how it sort of cements our belief and our understanding of the world, which is absolutely vital in fiction to understand that. Whether you take a position of, I want to write a story in my novel, or my position, which is, I don't want to tell a story. I'm not interested in story. I'm interested in storytelling and why we feel the need to do it. But the actual story itself, which, let's face it, there are only 6 or 7 in the world, I'm not interested in. So I'm hoping this book will give a very erudite look into that. This was recommended by Neil Griffiths on his Booktube channel, which I shall link to below. But having read the first 27 pages, I'm afraid this might just be a Jungian collective unconscious thing, and I exceed the concept of a collective unconscious, that it doesn't matter culturally, you know, what part of the world you're from. There seem to be these recurring themes and archetypes and stories in every culture, or in most cultures. So I understand and accept that's quite likely. But Jung was such an anti-Semite that, you know, I can't be doing with Carl Jung. So I really hope this book isn't just you know, I read a lot of Jung because I did a psychology paper at university, so I studied him quite a lot, and I think he is the sort of psychoanalyst theorist of arts and creativity and artists, more than Freud, for example. I mean, Freud's notions on art were completely balmy. So Jung, you know, at the time seemed to have a lot more to offer to me. But as I say, I couldn't get past his anti-Semitism. So that's it. So I'm really sort of nonplussed as to what I should be reading next. You know, got 2 books of non-fiction which I'm not in the mood for. Oh, 3 if you count Mark Thomas, which I'm not really in the mood for because I'm doing a bit of non-fiction. I've got 2 books of short stories, of which that is one, that is another. I'm definitely not in the mood for short stories. I've got Sebald, which I think is a sort of meditative thing, and you have to be in a sort of meditative mood, I think, for that. The Blood Oranges, the John Hawkes. I think this is going towards the top of the pile, but it can't be the next one, because if it's the 3rd John Hawkes book that I don't enjoy, I mean, I've sort of wouldn't forgive it really being top of the pile. What by Beckett, as I say, I feel I have to read Malone Dies next before I read that. Jenny Offill was the one about the marriage. Just doesn't grab me enough as an idea. Blake Butler. Now this has kept slipping down. I think maybe it's about time. Also the way it's written, the way it's laid out on the page, it shouldn't be that long a read, but he's such an intense writer. Don't be fooled by... It's about 250 page book. Don't be fooled by the sort of layout that it's going to be a quick read, because he isn't. Now Pynchon, I was going to read next before I picked up the Sukanik, and I think this probably will be top of the pile. With this, Politics of Asylum following the second close, because I feel obliged that I must review it. And nutshell, well, I've got to overcome my antipathy towards McEwan to be willing to read this, even though I totally take Beth's recommendation of it. So if you've got any comments on any of those books to help me decide which maybe I should read next, please chip in, and it might help. In the next 2 days, I will finish the Sukanik, and it might help resolve what I'm going to read next. Thanks very much. Till next time.